Part 10, Chapter 19. In his command post at McMurran, Colonel Wilkins sat around the table with his advisors, Majors Jett and Lee. They listened to the silence coming from the compact, digital, state-of-the-art, utterly helpless console. The telephone beside the radio beckoned. If ego weren't an issue, if it weren't for the long-standing "we can handle this" attitude at McMurran, would Wilkins be sitting here while God only knew what was going on out there? Though part of him wanted to get a nuclear emergency search team to the site, a larger part of him didn't want to panic, or cause panic, if the press learned that Nest was involved. The odds were that this was a blown fuse in the Black Hawk or a crapped-out chip in Rhodes's helmet, and not a leaking warhead. Lee unclasped his hands and jiggled a coaxial cable in the back. Then he pushed the auto-tune button. The computer-sized unit quickly ran through the audio spectrum to the immediate left and right of the channel. The silence was as thick as before. "Maybe something's happened to the relay inside the chopper," Jett suggested. Wilkins said, "Wouldn't they try to contact us then on the walkie?" "Colonel Wilkins!" A terrified voice exploded from the suddenly live speaker. "Sir, are you there?" Wilkins leaned towards the unit. "I'm here. Who is this?" "It's Lieutenant Kelly, sir." "What happened, Kelly?" "Colonel Rhodes is dead, sir," Kelly said. He swallowed audibly. "They're all dead." "What happened?" It's the nuke, sir," Kelly said. "It's open! Wide open!" Wilkins looked at his advisors. Major Lee was already out of his seat and running towards the door. "I'm going to the tower to recall the teams," he said. Wilkins nodded. "Oh God, sir!" Kelly waited. "What am I going to do? I was exposed." "Just stay where you are, son," Wilkins said. "We'll get help to you." But the radiation!" Kelly gurgled. "Oh God, God, I want to have kids, sir. I feel sick." There was a clunk, and then the radio went silent again. Wilkins looked at Major Jett. "Get the room on the line for me," the colonel said. "We're going to need Nest to handle this." "Right away," Jett said, reaching for the phone. Wilkins slumped in his chair. It was as though, one after another, every worst-case scenario option was taking place. He couldn't have written a worse disaster. It hadn't even registered, really, that Rhodes was dead. In Vietnam, he'd seen people die. The spurts of blood, soul-piercing shrieks, sudden disappearance of fingers, limbs, or faces. All of that wrote death in stone. But hearing about it like this, especially here in idyllic Utah, just didn't seem real. The sick irony was, if this was as bad as Kelly had indicated, more people were likely to die than had perished in any war or disaster in the second half of this century. And the nuclear arsenal of the US military would be investigated, made public, and hamstrung for decades. As he contemplated the scope of the unfolding disaster, Colonel Wilkins told himself that world-shaping events didn't always start with a bullet in the head of a president, or the killer who stalked Archduke Ferdinand, or a hard-boiled team of assassins gunning down the Tsar, or some other hard target. Sometimes they began on the other end of a radio, on a quiet night in a little corner of Utah. For the first time, Wilkins found himself wishing he had the capacity of poor Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes to pray. because before this night was done, he had a feeling he'd need it. Chapter 20. Lieutenant Kelly emerged from the crevasse to applause from Major Deakins. "You missed your calling," Deakins said. The lieutenant bowed slightly as he approached. "I'd like to thank the members of the academy, and especially my father, who was always drunk and taught me how to act scared." "Save the comic relief for amateur night," Pritchett interrupted. He looked at Deakins. "You wriggled out of that corner, and I hope you've got another surprise up your Nomex sleeve. If I'm not mistaken, there are 2 attack helicopters headed this—" "Not any longer," Johnson cut in. Pritchett's eyes shifted to the radio operator. "What happened?" Johnson tapped his helmet. "They've just been recalled." Kelly swaggered over. "As I was saying, I wanted to thank my dad for teaching me to lie like a whore." "They just turned around." Pritchett snapped his fingers. "Like that." "Like that," Deakins said as he approached Pritchett. "You see, thanks to Kelly's performance, McMurran thinks they've got an exposed core or 2 down there. They'll want to get a satellite to take a look in the visible and various other spectra, but it'll take 90 minutes minimum to put one in position. Until then, well, people get a little weird when it comes to radiation. No one'll have the balls to come here unless it's Nest." Deakins leaned close to Pritchett. "That's Nuclear Emergency Research Team. Guys in spacesuits. The top bubbleheads are calling them in now, but the nearest team would take at least 2 hours to pack up, get to Utah, unload, and get out here. And we, being already here and well prepared, will need only an hour to reach our connection with the transport team. So, relax." Pritchett's expression hadn't changed. To Deakins, he still looked as wary as he had the first day they had met and talked about this little adventure. Of all the scuzzbags at that meeting, Pritchett was the best dressed, tannest, and scummiest. Deakins took a few steps away from his employer. "Now, Mr. P, if I may make a suggestion, it isn't that I'm not delighted with your presence, but the truth is, you really don't need to be here. It would be perfectly okay with me if you truck on over to the nearest greasy spoon and have yourself a cup of joe." "I think not," Pritchett said. He added dryly, "It excites me to see a professional at the top of his form." "Suit yourself," Deakins said. "Just don't get in the way, okay?" "Okay. Oh, Deakins." "Yeah," the major said over his shoulder. "Just don't give me a reason," Pritchett smiled.